Alright, by now you've probably seen my season debut as a player in Prismatic Draft League Season 7. If not, by all means go back and watch. But, of course, there's still the rest of Week 3 to look at, and it starts, as is tradition, with the weekly standings update. So these are the standings after Week 2. The set that I've already played and put out there is not reflected here. I'm thinking about whether there's something I want to do with my format here so that the standings update is a little less awkward and it does account for everything that you've already seen. But for now, this is how it is. Maybe I'll move it to the first video of the week. I don't know. I'm thinking about it. But after Week 2, you can see the Foraging Furrets and the Liberty Garden Garchomps tied for first place in the league, with the Peaceful Porygons right behind them by only 1 point of game differential. Then the usual cluster in the middle, and a few teams down here still looking for their first win. But of course, just 2 weeks into the season, everyone is very much still in contention for what I believe will be a 6-team playoff field. And now, you might be wondering why I haven't covered any trades yet this season, and the reason is there haven't been any, but that changes this week as 3 different teams made free agent trades going into Week 3. Remember, in this draft league, you have 4 roster slots that can be freely swapped out for Pokemon that no team has. To change any of the rest of your roster, you have to make a coach trade, so trade between 2 different teams. That has still not happened this season, but those free agent trades with those 4 designated roster spots, those have now started up. And the very first roster change of the season was made by the Foraging Furrets, dropping Torkoals and picking up Bellibolt. Once again, a Pokemon where I had to check the spelling of its name to be sure before I put it in this slide. Am I getting old? Maybe so. But I also don't really know what Bellibolt does for this team or in general. Like, it's kind of tanky. It has an okay special attack stat. It has some electric and water coverage and an ability that somehow boosts its damage output when it takes a hit. I don't really remember exactly how it works. It definitely does one important thing for this team, which is bring the number of frogs that they have from 3 to 2. Excuse me, that's backwards. From 2 to 3. With Politoed, Poliwrath, and now also Bellibolt. But that aside, I mean, they have Raichu already for an electric type. Bellibolt has more damage potential, but maybe it has some support text that I'm sleeping on or something. I really don't know what this Pokemon does, but I think we'll get an early look at it in this very video with this week's replays. Up next, the Alberta Arcanines have made 2 changes, dropping Knacklestack and Gothita for Alolan Golem and Primeape. So this suggests to me that they see a couple of modes on this team not really working. The Knacklestack has, I think, not been able to have the same kind of presence as the Garchomps from the Varsity Farmboys, both this season and last. Able to set up with Iron Defense and maybe a Moringa Berry and do damage over time with Salt Cure. I don't think the Knacklestack has been able to get going in quite the same way. And the Gothita for a possible Perish mode with the Lapras. I think we've seen that the bulk just isn't necessarily there for that. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what another coach is thinking when they make a change like that, but this does look to me like a team that had a couple of modes in mind that haven't really been paying off so far, and are maybe just trying to bring more power onto their team now. Alolan Golem certainly has sort of more immediate stats and power and offensive coverage with that electric typing than Knacklestack. And you can definitely run still some interesting plays with it, with like Galvanize Explosion or something. And then Primeape. So we saw the biblically accurate Mousehold last season try to use Primeape kind of like an Annihilate, stack Rage Fists and go, but with the Eviolite for the bulk. It didn't really work for them. I don't know that Primeape is necessarily adding a lot of power to this team, but hey, I'm sure it hits harder than Gothita does, right? So, yeah, these trades definitely make this team a bit more flexible in how it can play, and I don't 100% see what these exact Pokemon do, but again, I think we'll start to get a look at that very soon. And finally, The Florida Falinks have dropped Spupa and picked up Diglett. I still don't really know what Spupa was supposed to do. I know Ninja Meerkat, one of their coaches, was kind of hyping up that there was something that Spupa was going to do that was going to be interesting this season. It now looks like this is not the case, as a team is not able to pick back up a Pokemon that they have dropped. So the Falinks will be unable to use Spupa for the rest of the season, and I suspect that nobody else is rushing to pick it up. So I'll have to find out what Spupa does another time, but Diglett is kind of interesting for... It's untiered, right? It must be. Kind of interesting for a Pokemon way down the tier list, certainly. It doesn't really have a lot of stats or power, but of course, Arena Trap is able to shake the game up in a significant way. Even just in the team builder, as any opponents facing the Falinks going forward this season will have to make sure that they have contingency plans to avoid being trapped if that's something harmful to their team. They'll have to weigh how much they care about that and whether they value, more often using a Ghost or Flying Terra or even something like a Shed Shell or a pivoting move where they didn't before. Obviously, there are a lot of options to avoid being trapped by Arena Trap, but teams will have to weigh the opportunity cost now of using those options when they could otherwise have done something else. And, if they're not properly prepared, maybe Diglett gets its positioning just right and sets them up to lose what would otherwise be a winnable game because they can't make an important switch or something like that. Ninja Meerkat did sort of vaguely allude to what this trade was about in the Discord, saying that I feel like Victory got away from me last week, like it ran faster than me. What if we could stop that? Maybe not directly, but we can certainly stop their tools. And yet somehow the only way to do that is to use bald, feetless beings. If Diglett is the savior I've been waiting for, then so be it. So that's pretty cryptic, but safe to say they're cooking something with this. And that is the first round of trades for PDL Season 7. And like I said, I think we're going to see what these Pokemon can do, at least some of them, pretty quickly once we get into the replays, which will be right now. And sure enough, right off the bat, we have a few of the trades represented, as we're starting with the very first set that was played this week. Mine was actually the last one played, even though it was uploaded first. Foraging Furrets versus Alberta Arcanine, and all three new Pokemon from these teams are here. Bellibolt, Alolan Golem, and Primeape, all at least present at preview. Hopefully we'll see them hit the field. The Furrets have brought... obviously, Rain Mode with Politoed and Kingdra. They have both of their electric types in Raichu and Bellibolt. Raichu, of course, able to redirect electric type attacks from the Golem on the other side, if that's what the Arcanines try to go for. Bellibolt, I mean, like I said, the main thing that I can see it doing is using its ability, however exactly that works, and firing off boosted electric type attacks. So maybe just looking to land some big thunders in the rain into something like Lapras. But again, I haven't looked that closely at Bellibolt. It might well do something that I haven't thought of. In fact, I'd almost be surprised if it doesn't. Then we have the Superior, able to threaten not so much the Ninetales and Typhlosion, although, I mean, it could have a Terra type to cover for those, but certainly things like Lapras and Alolan Golem are not going to enjoy taking those Leaf Storms, and Superior could potentially boost up and snowball pretty quickly, especially since the opponent has to cover for other strong offensive pieces like the Kingdra. And then finally the Furret, who's to say what that's going to do this week? I think we don't speculate on that and we just watch and see. But before we jump right in, on the Arcanine side, they do have the Sun mode with Ninetales and Hisui and Typhlosion, so there will be a weather war here, as the Furrets are fairly invested in Rain, I would say, along with the Superior not really wanting to face the two Fire types. So if the Ninetales is positioned well, it could definitely put in a lot of work this game. The Smeargle might be able to help it with that positioning, although the Arcanine have shown a tendency to use offensive Smeargle so far, so I'm not going to assume it's a support set this time. And then, yeah, Alolan Golem and Lapras are sort of interesting coverage options. I mean, Alolan Golem is a tricky matchup into things like water types because it's still a Golem, and yeah, the Raichu could definitely make its life harder, but with some smart positioning, it might be able to put in some work. The Lapras, again, it's a little bit tricky, but I can see some value for it as a matchup piece, and I don't know about the Primeape, so yeah, that's enough trying to speculate from me. The Weather War is pretty obvious, but I don't necessarily know what the rest of these Pokemon do, and we're just going to have to watch. as we start with Lapras and Golem against... A shiny Golem looks kind of nice. Against 2 electric types, Bellibolt and Raichu. Okay. 3 electric types total on the field, and a Lapras that's probably feeling pretty scared in this moment. Golem is the one that switches right out, though, for Primeape, as Bellibolt goes straight for the Electric Terra. Primeape takes a fake out. Lapras just rips off a Sheer Cold immediately, but it misses into Bellibolt. And now I see... Okay, now we're starting to see the vision, right? Terra Electric Discharge from Bellibolt is going to hit both these Pokemon hard. It has a high chance to paralyze, 30% I think, and it's going to boost Raichu thanks to the Lightning Rod, while still hitting everything because of that spread damage. And look at that damage into Lapras. Raichu then going for Discharge. Of course, it can't paralyze Bellibolt because that's an Electric type. And we see that ability I've been alluding to, Electromorphosis. Looks like it works like Charge, so the move Charge, I believe it also gives a special defense boost to the user, which it looks like Electromorphosis will not be doing. But the original effective Charge, all the way back to Gen 3, is you use it, and your next Electric-type attack gets a power boost. I'm not sure how much, but that's what it does. It boosts Electric-type attacks. So Bellibolt has that as an ability that activates when it takes a hit, so it doesn't have to activate the charge itself. Someone else can do that for it, and this is why you have the double Electric types on this team. The Raichu able to safely activate the Bellibolt with the Discharge, while the Bellibolt in turn gives a boost to Raichu's Lightning Rod with its own Discharge. So this Discharge spam is a really cool attack, and that trade makes a lot more sense to me now that I see exactly what they were going for with it, as they do just kind of melt the Lapras and Primeape here. Alolan Golem is back. Of course, it won't mind taking Discharge, and we see the Terra Electric on the Smeargle. So no more Paralysis threatened, and everything on the field resists Discharge. Of course, Raichu is at +2 special attack now, so it's still going to do some damage here, and it doesn't really have to worry about attacking its teammate, I assume, because there are still 2 Pokemon in the back that honestly can probably clean these 2 up, but we'll see. That Discharge still does a lot to Smeargle. Bellibolt survives, so it'll get another chance to attack. Smeargle goes for Population Bomb into Raichu. That's pretty cool. And it does KO. Population Bomb Smeargle is a pretty funny tech. I think we've seen it from them more than once this season. But the Bellibolt just... I didn't know Golem was going to drop to that. But Bellibolt, you know, like I said, reasonable special attack stat. And it's charge boosted by the Raichu. That last Discharge knocks out an Alolan Golem from 69%. And yeah, that was just a Discharge sweep. So Bellibolt making just the best possible debut for the Foraging Furrets here. A Pokemon that, let's be honest, it's pretty obvious at this point, I pretty well overlooked. Putting in a ton of work in this Discharge spam mode. That's a lot of fun to see. But of course, it's time for Game 2 now, and we see Smeargle and Lapras leading against Kingdra and Serperior. I said ooh because Lapras seems like a bold lead considering what happened in Game 1, but the Electric types are not present in the lead spots this time, as we do see 2 different Pokemon for the Foraging Furrets now, Kingdra and Serperior. If we see Kingdra, then I think there's probably a Politoed in the back, but of course, by leading with these 2, they get a lot of offensive pressure. They can be flexible in which spot to switch out to Politoed if they want to do that at all. But even then, apart from like Ninetales and Typhlosion, Kingdra doesn't even really need the speed control into this team. It might want to switch out against Lapras though, fearing a possible Freeze Dry, not being able to hit that very hard. On the other hand, Serperior is threatening Lapras with a Leaf Storm immediately. Serperior goes straight for a Ghost Terra and just one-shots the Smeargle with Population Bomb. So I'm not sure what the Kingdra is going to do. It didn't protect, and it didn't switch out, and Serperior didn't attack Lapras. Maybe Kingdra has something up its sleeve. Maybe they think they're just gonna they think it's just gonna be another Freeze Dry, or not Freeze Dry. Maybe they think it's just gonna be another Sheer Cold. I don't know. As for the Terra Ghost Serperior, I'm gonna be honest. I don't remember everyone's rosters well enough to be sure what that could be covering for. Actually, I still have my spreadsheet open. You can't see it, but I can take a quick look. Oh, maybe it's just to take a hit from the Porygon Zed. I don't know. In any case, I didn't bring the Porygon Zed this week, but certainly Terra Ghost Serperior will not have to worry about taking a Population Bomb, even if the Leaf Storm misses or the Smeargle shows a Focus Sash. So Serperior covering for that with the Ghost Terra, I assume. One shots the Smeargle. Kingdra just goes straight from Muddy Water, but Lapras shows the Water Absorb. So they probably were covering for a Focus Sash Smeargle there. Hisuian Typhlosion comes in, and thanks to the Frisk, we see the items on these two Pokemon. Life Orb, Kingdra, Assault Vest, Serperior. Okay, Serperior being unable to protect. Again, all the more reason to run the Ghost Terra to get around things like Offensive Smeargle and Porygon Z. And we see the Ghost Terra Blast into Typhlosion, so that's another reason to have that Terra type. Knocks Typhlosion down to its Sash. Politoed has come in now. Serperior able to heal itself with a Giga Drain into Lapras. So Serperior putting in a ton of work, as we don't see the Ninetales so far. There may not be a Weather War after all. I'm not sure the Ninetales is there in the back. The Endeavor on Hisuian Typhlosion is pretty cool, knocking Politoed down to 1%. If they could finish Politoed off, say with the Lapras' action here, then maybe if they have Ninetales in the back, they could be bringing it in to win the Weather War. That's quite possibly what they're going for here, but Lapras may be afraid of the Serperior, just going straight for a Sheer Cold, and actually connecting this time. Serperior is knocked out, but Politoed will knock out Hisuian Typhlosion. The rain is still up, Typhlosion is gone. Is it Ninetales in the back? It is. So, but the Furrets still have a third Pokemon in the back, so they're able to switch Politoed out. They'll be able to bring it back in. Bellibolt is crit by that Flamethrower, but Bellibolt isn't important at this point. They can just switch Typhlosion in and knock Ninetales out. They actually switch it into the Kingdra slot, so Bellibolt gets a chance to attack with a Thunderbolt here. Thunderbolt and Discharge. I guess makes sense, because Thunderbolt is what you click next to anything other than Raichu. And it's just a matter of time at this point, I think, as that Flamethrower is not doing much to Politoed. Politoed will take the last KO. Look at these two frogs side by side. Some very different frog designs, but gotta love both of them right now if you're the foraging Furrets. And yeah, they take this one over the Alberta Arcanine. We saw... I'm still not over the double discharge in Game 1. That was a really cool mode. But then we also saw the Serperior putting in work in Game 2, which I always love to see, as well as Rain pretty handily cleaning up in this Weather War here. Up next, we have the Marvelous Bridge Malamars against the Varsity Farmboys. The Malamars bringing a bunch of power, it looks like, to try to break through this bulky Farmboys team. If it's something like Crit Hydreigon, that could be very strong into boosting Pokemon like Archaludon and Garganacl. Even if there's a Moringa Berry on something, you can crit through that with a strong Draco Meteor. It could be a different Hydreigon set. Maybe it says Tailwind, maybe it has Specs. But yeah, something like a Focus Energy Razor Fang Hydreigon I think could be pretty strong in this matchup. Of course, it has to watch out for the Comfey and the Mienshao. But then you have Blaziken and Hisuian Decidueye, both fighting types that can hit very hard. Hisuian Decidueye able to get some drops and crits with its triple arrows. So again, a very strong Pokemon into the likes of Archaludon, Blissey, and Garganacl if you can position it correctly. The Haunch Crow could be playing towards some crits. The Malamar can boost itself up with Contrary and Superpower. I don't know what the Lycanroc does, but there are a lot of different ways that this team can try to break through. On the Farmboys side, maybe anticipating that in this kind of matchup, they have not brought the Garganacl or the Blissey. We do see the Archaludon, and Greninja is here threatening to set it up, and Comfey is here able to keep it, keep it safe and healthy. The Archaludon also probably has a Terra type to help it take things like triple arrows, but yeah, that's only one game plan the Farmboys have available. There are definitely ways that the Malamars might be able to break through, but then they also have the Magmar for redirection to make it a little bit harder to break the Archaludon, especially with something like Blaziken or Hisuian Decidueye that might have trouble getting through the Magmar. They have their starter duo in Greninja and Venusaur able to set up the swamp so that they can get offensive pressure out literally more quickly than the opponent and overwhelm the Malamars that way. And then again, the Mienshao is it's definitely strong into Hydreigon. It can hit some of these other Pokemon pretty hard too, so it's a tricky matchup. I think the Malamars showed up prepared to break through a bulky mode, and the Farmboys bringing a little bit more offensive pressure to adjust for that, but this definitely could go either way, judging by the preview. As we see Mienshao and Comfey leading against Decidueye and Blaziken. Okay, Blaziken protecting, getting its speed boost, and avoiding the fake out. Decidueye I couldn't remember for a second there whether Decidueye has an ability that stops flinching, but I don't think it does, so it must have a Covert Cloak. Sets Tailwind for its team. A lot of speed control on the Malamars side right now. Maybe leading this to cover for the Swamp. Comfey goes straight for a Calm Mind, which is actually pretty dangerous into these two fighting types, even though, of course, Blaziken is not weak to Fairy. But Blaziken's still able to potentially do a lot here. As we see it go for Scorching Sands. Mienshao coaching. Comfey now has both of its defenses boosted. So I actually did know because of the Discord discussion that it's a special Blaziken. Which is pretty strong, again, into the likes of Archaludon and Garganacl. Although the Garganacl's not here, it may have some more trouble breaking Calm Mind Comfey. And the Comfey was getting pretty nicely set up now, but the Hisuian Decidueye showing Haze. Very nice tech into this Comfey. Potentially able to stop it from snowballing. The only problem, of course, is if Comfey just starts clicking Draining Kiss, and Mienshao clicks like U-Turn or even Acrobatics if they have it, then Hisuian Decidueye might not be able to sit on the field for very long. So we might see Decidueye Terrasilize soon, maybe. I don't know what its Terra type is. That Haze was very good on this turn, but they still have work to do if they want to stop this Comfey from getting going again. Scorching Sands, yeah, just not doing that much. Not a super strong attack with no stab. Blaziken taking a lot from the Mienshao, but eating its Pitaya Berry, so its special attacks will be boosted now. Might want to start see it clicking Heat Wave or something at this point, but it just gets knocked out by that priority Draining Kiss. With Comfey again at +1, gets another coaching. Decidueye going for a Leaf Blade this time. It does crit, but it's not enough to KO, and we see a Key Berry on the Comfey as well. So, classic Farmboys game plan, right? The Blissey and the Garganacl are not here this week. Doesn't matter. The Comfey has like 3 different ways to boost up and keep itself healthy and try to run through all the dark and fighting types on the opposing side. And we see it land a Draining Kiss into Decidueye this turn. It doesn't actually do that much, but they double up with Close Combat. Mienshao still not KO'd. It is now by Lycanroc. But Blaziken and Decidueye are both down. I'm not sure the Malamars have enough left here. The Malamar itself takes a little more than half from a Draining Kiss. And we see the I was going to say Terra Water, but it's just Protean. We see the Greninja get all 5 hits with its Water Shuriken. Could be loaded dice. Probably is on a team like this. And take out the Lycanroc. The Lycanroc, still a little bit of luck there because the Lycanroc would have taken 4 hits, right? Yeah, but Greninja gets all 5, and then is able to just clean up the Malamar from there. I talked about the Malamar's ability to boost up with Contrary, and in Tailwind it could do a lot of work for sure, but into strong special attacks from, 3 out of 4 Pokemon on the other side, the Malamar is a little bit let down by its stats here before boosting up, and so it's just not able to get going into this kind of pressure. And so I do like the Malamar's game plan quite a bit, but the Farmboys are so well prepared this week with that Comfey, which just goes crazy in this matchup as we saw this game. So they're going to need a plan to break the Comfey in Game 2. I won't be surprised to see the Lycanroc earlier, or some kind of interesting Terra type on, I don't know, take your pick. The Blaziken was just not doing enough damage to break the Comfey, although we only saw it click Scorching Sands. A Fire-type attack would probably do more, right? But maybe we see something like Decidueye or Honchkrow with a helpful Terra type, or maybe we see the Lycanroc early, but they need to do something to beat this Comfey. But we actually see Greninja and Archaludon leading for the Farmboys in Game 2. Maybe the Comfey is in the back, but it makes sense when you're up a game to not just throw it out there for them to counter it. Once they figured out a way to do that, right? So, smart lead here from Farmboys, and we do see Decidueye with Hydreigon. I do still wonder whether it's going to be a crit Hydreigon set. But it goes straight for Terra Steel. We see Terra Fairy on the Archaludon. That's going to be hard for these two Pokemon to deal with, I think, especially as it gets set up with the Water Shuriken. But we know that the Decidueye has Haze. Maybe they just clicked it this turn. Hydreigon goes for Earth Power. Decidueye takes a Body Press. Did it click Haze? It clicked Tailwind. Can it take the Water Shuriken? No. Even 4 hits will KO, and that's what happens. Water Shuriken's priority coming through there for the Greninja, as there's now no haze to remove our Chaladon's boosts. Body Press takes out the Steel Hydreigon, although Hydreigon did a lot of damage first. But the Steel Terra Blast into the Fairy or Chaladon, that's kind of a fun interaction. Maybe anticipating that Fairy was a likely Terra type for the opponent's setup Pokemon to bring, because again, the Malamars have a lot of Dark and Fighting types. Fairy offers some pretty obvious resistances, so then smart adjustment to that with the Terra Steel Hydreigon. But they are now already down to Blaziken and Lycanroc. Lycanroc is in the middle of taking a Water Shuriken that will most likely KO it. And I don't think Blaziken pulls this one back by itself. Going for a normal type Terra Blast into our Chaladon. It does KO. But again, the speed boost and Tailwind are great, but Water Shuriken priority, there's just not much you can do about that at this point. We've already used their Terra. This Water Shuriken might not KO, but it gets all 5 hits, and it does. So Greninja putting in a ton of work this game. Yeah, and the Varsity Farm Boys, I feel like they really I mean, their team is... I've talked up a lot how strong their team is, but I feel like they really out-prepped this matchup as well, as the Comfey was just so hard to deal with in Game 1. And then they had the Archaladon to fall back on in Game 2, in case their opponent found an answer to the Comfey. So yeah, solid game plans I'd say on both sides, but the Varsity Farm Boys still look like an absolute menace this season, and I don't know what I'm going to do when we face them eventually, but, you know, this is how it goes with that team sometimes. Okay. Without better insight than that, we'll move on to Florida Falinks versus Liberty Garden Garchomps. And actually, every new Pokemon that was traded onto a team this week is showing up, as we do see the Diglett here. Most notably, well, actually, I mean, they have 3 ground weaknesses on the Garchomp side, so most notably able to trap, take your pick of Tyranitar, Empoleon, and Excadrill. Hard to say whether the Diglett really does much to those Pokemon, but maybe with like a Focus Sash it can do some damage, or even just enable Mudsdale or Tauros to get some big hits off. The Garchomps, of course, we know how they play at this point. They brought 3 ground types to this matchup, and 1 flying type. So Garchomp can click Earthquake next to Gliscor, Excadrill can click Earthquake next to Gliscor. If it's something like a Terra Flying Tyranitar, any of the 3 ground types can click Earthquake next to that. Excuse me. But the Falinks do have decent cover for that. They have probably Intimidate on the Tauros, plus it's an offensive threat into everything on the other side, except maybe Clefable. They have Thwackey to set grassy terrain and weaken Earthquake. They had Mudsdale to tank physical hits and get stamina boosts. And then Dragapult is just faster than everything. Although Tyranitar can definitely give it some trouble, maybe, depending on their respective sets. They have fast support in the Ambipom, so they're pretty well geared up to deal with Earthquake spam this week. And we'll have to see what else the Garchomps can do. Maybe a game plan running through the Clefable, which is their best answer to Dragapult and Tauros, and maybe one of their better answers to Mudsdale as well. Maybe the Empoleon has a surprising set. But yeah, I don't think it's as simple as Earthquake spam this week, that's for sure. But we see Tyranitar and Empoleon leading against Tauros and Ambipom, okay. Empoleon gets a competitive boost immediately. Tyranitar switches out to Gliscor, Empoleon flinches, and is it going to take a fighting attack? Nope, Tauros goes for bulk up, okay. But Tauros is still in a good position to put in work this next turn, although it's a little bit tricky. The Gliscor could be a threat to it depending on its set. We see Ambipom go for Covet. It steals leftovers from Empoleon, but Tauros does just go for a Wave Crash into a Protect and get knocked out by Grass Knot, so the setup does not pay off for the Tauros in the end. Empoleon will lose a little bit of staying power without its leftovers. Okay, Ambipom had a normal gem, I missed that. I was wondering, did it not have an item in the first place? But no, it's geared up to get the boosted Fake Out and then steal an item. The Empoleon is still set up here. We'll see the Mudsdale come in, and it goes straight for Grass Terra. Okay, and beat up to activate Stamina. I mean, I felt like something like that Grass Terror was coming up if Mudsdale came into this boosted Empoleon. We'll see if Silver has anticipated it here. Grass Knot still does reasonable damage to Mudsdale, but it is now resisted with the Grass typing, and a Body Press will KO the Empoleon back. Gliscor is set up with Swords Dance, though. That Pokemon could still definitely put in work, especially with Clefable supporting it with possible Follow Me. No Follow Me comes out, Gliscor gets taunted, but it's already at +2 attack. It's probably okay with that. Clefable just goes for an Icy Wind, and so now Gliscor is getting a speed advantage as well. Clefable takes a lot from that Heavy Slam, but is not KO'd. But Mudsdale is so physically bulky now, the knockoff from Gliscor is not doing a whole lot back. And of course Mudsdale resists a possible Earthquake, so it looks like there might not be a Flying type attack on the Gliscor. Tyranitar gets back in, we see Dragapult here. Tyranitar going for the Terra Rock, okay. Choice Band Dragapult takes a hit from Gliscor, loses its Choice Band. Good to know now what its item is. Mudsdale dodges this Rock Slide, and so does Dragapult. Body Press does a decent amount back to Gliscor, all things considered. And with Taunt wearing off, Gliscor has a chance to protect now. That means the Dragon Darts will hit Tyranitar twice, but Tyranitar is okay with that. It does now land a Rock Slide into Dragapult, though not Mudsdale. Mudsdale going back with Body Press, but Gliscor should be able to win this from here. Oh, I forgot the Ambipom is still there. And the Gliscor just protected. It could go for the double protect, but it doesn't, and it gets knocked out by a Body Press. Yeah, I think Gliscor did have to just try the double protect that turn. And then these two Pokemon drop to Sand damage, so Gliscor, well, Ambipom might, does Leftovers go before Sand? This is something I should know by now. No, it doesn't, so they drop before Sand to Sand damage. So Gliscor needed to click Protect on that last turn, and it wins the game 1/3 of the time then, but obviously the odds were against it either way. But solid game one from both players, a lot of setup and strong attacks flying back and forth. Definitely fun to watch, and we'll see what they've got for us now in Game 2. As it's Clefable and Empoleon leading against Diglett, nicknamed Bald, and Tauros. Empoleon once again gets a competitive boost immediately. If Tauros wants to try to remove it more quickly this time, well, here's where we might see Clefable click Follow Me. That said, Diglett, well, unless Diglett is going to click Earthquake, which I'm not sure it is in this position or on this team with Thwackey, then, I mean, Diglett probably not threatening that much damage into Clefable, so Empoleon might have a real chance to get going here. We see Terra Steel on the Tauros. Diglett just clicks Endeavor and sets up a KO into the Clefable. Okay, so that's a fun Diglett tech that I didn't think of. Clefable is gone immediately. And Diglett takes an Ice Beam thanks to a Focus Sash. We see the Terra Grass on the Empoleon. Diglett with Endeavor, taking Tyranitar down to 1%, but Empoleon does take that close combat after terastallizing. It knocks out the Diglett, but it took 2 turns to get rid of this Diglett, and Tauros would still have a chance to get going, except it gets KO'd by the high horsepower from Tyranitar, having, of course, already turned itself into a Steel type. So, pretty easy play there for the Garchomps to make there. And so these two Pokemon are low, but the Falinks are already down to their last 2. We see Mudsdale and Thwackey. Empoleon switching out of what turns out to be a U-turn by Thwackey. Tyranitar removes the Eviolite. Tyranitar still standing, and now Garchomp is on the field. Mudsdale setting up with Iron Defense. I mean, that's their win con at this point, but it looks like the Thwackey will be removed pretty soon. And then Empoleon probably just cleans up. Thwackey drops the Sand damage. Yeah, Mudsdale not taking much from the Garchomp's Dragon Claw, but the Grass Knot knocks it clean out. Of course, the Grass Terra is not available to it this time because the Tauros has already terastallized. So, as fun as it was to watch that Diglett chip things down with Endeavor, all it really managed to do was chip things down. And the Garchomps just had enough firepower in the back and preserved the Empoleon to make sure that it could clean up the Mudsdale, which this time was not able to terastallize. And so the Falinks ran out of gas in the end. But of course, that ties the set at 1 win each. So we now go to Game 3. Tyranitar and Garchomp leading against Diglett and Tauros. They are back, and this time Tauros will not be boosting a lead Empoleon. All it does is intimidate Tyranitar with its ability, and Tyranitar will probably not be able to switch out. Garchomp showing the clear amulet, not intimidated by the Tauros, but still not the greatest offensive positioning here for the Garchomps, who, for the first time in this set, did not lead Empoleon into the Intimidate lead that came out all 3 games. Garchomp protecting itself on the Endeavor, so good call there. Tauros going for the bulk up. Sees an opening to set up and get going. Tyranitar knocking Diglett down to its sash without Diglett having really accomplished much yet. Diglett forced to protect here to keep these Pokemon stuck on the field as Tauros' close combat will take out Tyranitar. But the Garchomp, of course, still able to be a threat potentially. We see the Clefable come in now. Diglett switching out to Mudsdale. Mudsdale will take that Dragon Claw pretty nicely and get a stamina boost. Clefable clicking Shadow Ball into the Tauros, of course stopped by Protect. And there's the Empoleon in the back. But this time the Terra is still available to the Falinks. Although Mudsdale takes a lot from that Shadow Ball, it does recover a decent amount with the Citrus Berry. It lands a heavy slam that does decent damage to Clefable. But I don't know whether you Terrasilize the Mudsdale here. And there's actually no need, as Tauros has gotten through the first few turns this game. Still fairly healthy, able to just click close combat and knock out that Empoleon. This time the Tauros setup pays off very nicely for the Falinks, as Clefable is now focused on trying to remove the Mudsdale. Doesn't quite KO, but also the Tauros continues to just not take damage, and Mudsdale KOs Clefable back with the Heavy Slam. And, I mean, take your pick here. One of these Pokemon will knock the Garchomp out, and it's Tauros that gets to do the honors. So, Game 1, the Mudsdale got set up and terrestrialized, and the Garchomps just weren't able to break it. Game 2, the Empoleon lead, and then switching out at just the right moment to come back in and finish the Mudsdale off was too much for the Falinks to deal with. Game 3, I'm not sure what would have happened if we'd seen the Empoleon lead again, but we didn't. And the Tauros, with Diglett trapping some more favorable opponents on the field, the Tauros was able to get set up and run away with this one. And we do finally see that Tauros sweep that it kind of seems like Ninja Meerkat was going for from Game 1. Next set, we have the Cryptic Cryogonals taking on the Drowsy Torkoals. The Torkoals, let's start with them because there's a pretty obvious Sun team here. Sun Room from the looks of it. We do have the classic duo of Hisuian, Lilligant, and Torkoal. We also have a Shiftry, which could be running Chlorophyll and landing some hits on the physical side, or setting Tailwind for teammates like Lycanroc and Lilligant. Or it could be running Wind Rider and setting Tailwind for itself. We have the Trick Room component with the Orin Guru, the Torkoal doing big Fire-type damage, the Clawitzer being a slow Pokemon that does big Water-type damage, although that's nerfed by its teammate Sun in some modes, but of course it has other coverage as well. And then, yeah, the Dusk Form Lycanroc. Well, the Dusk Form Lycanroc makes decent sense to cover for things like Kilowattrel, right? Try to stop them from getting going. The Kilowattrel, of course, on the other side, able to set Tailwind for its team and give itself a wind power boost. We have Klefki able to set screens. Klefki also valuable here because, of course, it could be carrying Rain Dance, and so could turn off the sunlight that Pokemon like Lilligant, Torkoal, and even Shiftry might depend on. And then I guess the Clawitzer is helpful into that because it gives some offensive coverage into Crocodile and Hisuian Arcanine. But yeah, Arcanine able to intimidate physical attackers like Lycanroc and Shiftry, able to land, say, a big Extreme Speed into Lilligant, or Rock Slide into Torkoal, or Flare Blitz into something. So more of a balancy team from Reckless Trico here. We might see screens, we might see manual Rain Dance, but Pokemon like Hisuian, Arcanine, and Gyarados are probably going to be relatively hard for the Torkoals to remove. Yeah, the Drowsy Torkoals, that's what they're called, to remove. And we see the Crocodile again, able to pretty safely click Earthquake next to Kilowattrel or Gyarados or Gardevoir and get that spread damage into Pokemon like Torkoal and Lycanroc. So, Gardevoir and Crocodile leading against Shiftry and Lilligant. Shiftry goes right out to Torkoal. This might be one of those weather leads where they were kind of trying to feel out what the opponent was going to lead with and decide which Pokemon was more advantageous to switch out. But we do get Lilligant and Torkoal together now. Lilligant has been intimidated by the Crocodile, though. And we see the Terra Fairy Crocodile and the Terra Flying Lilligant immediately. Triple Axle into Crocodile, not doing too much after Terra and Intimidate. And Fairy Terra Blast from the Crocodile, plus Hyper Voice from the Gardevoir. It's only Mega Gardevoir that gets Pixelate, right? This one, I would assume, has Telepathy. It definitely doesn't get Pixelate, so that's a normal type Hyper Voice. But Lilligant surviving after that and the Fairy Terra Blast thanks to its own Terra. So still able to potentially cause some havoc with a Sleep Powder or an After You next turn. But Torkoal is chipped by the Hyper Voice, so its Eruption is not quite as scary next turn as it would be otherwise. We see Crocodile switch out to Gyarados, I guess covering for that Eruption anyway. Lilligant does go for the After You and Torkoal the Eruption. That does not do much to Gyarados. Hyper Voice will finish off Lilligant and chip Torkoal down some more. So even though Gardevoir doesn't get a Fairy-type Hyper Voice without Mega Evolving, which means it would have to go back in time to get that, we do still see the value of Hyper Voice in this matchup, as Lilligant is frail and Torkoal, because its main attack is Eruption, doesn't really like taking damage at all. So just having like a decent neutral coverage spread special attack is pretty strong into that mode. And we see it come through here as the Torkoal is now low and the Lilligant is gone. The Shiftry now has come in, and we'll see what it has for this Gyarados, if anything. I mean, the Gyarados is looking like a massive threat at this point. Shiftry just goes right for Explosion. Reckless Trico, maybe seeing that cover coming, protects the Gyarados. And so there goes probably their best tool to remove it. Actually, hold on. Wait, the Lycanroc is in the back, so that's a Gyarados answer. And of course, Reckless Trico has already used the Terra. So there is still an offensive check for the Gyarados available. That said, Reckless Trico is far enough ahead now, able to preserve the Gyarados, switch it out, go back to Crocodile. Between Crocodile and Arcanine, you can probably get some damage into this Lycanroc somehow, although we'll see what Panda does on the switch here. They also get the Intimidate into Lycanroc, and that does enable Arcanine to narrowly take a close combat and get a Rock Slide off. So that Intimidate actually making the difference there. Knocks Lycanroc down to its sash, and there's just not enough now for Lycanroc to win this. I would think. I mean, a big Rock Slide might still put in work, but it goes for Accelerock into Gyarados, and yeah, not enough damage. So Reckless Trico positioning the Gyarados just right there. Sort of answering its checks one by one with the Explosion Shiftry and then playing it carefully around the Lycanroc. And Gyarados is able to clean up in what is a pretty advantageous matchup for it from the looks of things. But then also the Arcanine surviving thanks to Crocodile's Intimidate was pretty clutch there. And both players ripped their Terra very early in that game. I think they both Terastallized turn 1, right? So we'll see if they play that way again or if they're more conservative with it now. But we see Kilowattrel leading next to Arcanine against Oranguru and Clawitzer, so probably a Trick Room mode coming out now. Arcanine shows the normal Terra. Is there an Extreme Speed to go with that? Clawitzer protecting around a Thunderbolt. And no, it just goes for Flare Blitz. I guess just looking to be able to take a water attack. Flare Blitz does a lot to Oranguru, but it doesn't KO, so the Trick Room goes up now. And Oranguru uses Instruct, but that's just going to make Clawitzer use Protect again, isn't it? Terra Grass Clawitzer too, not taking a Flare Blitz very comfortably at this point if it has to. Clawitzer, looks like Clawitzer's base speed is just a tiny bit lower than Oranguru's. Its min speed is 1 point lower, so I feel like the Clawitzer should be going first under Trick Room. There might have been a bit of a hiccup with their EVs there. But yeah, Instruct just makes it try to use Protect, which fails. But then it lands an Aura Sphere into Arcanine, so showing that coverage that I talked about. And with the Grass Terra, it takes a Thunderbolt nicely. And now the Instruct will work as intended. And yeah, it looks like there was a bit of a goof with the EVs there. Probably. Or it's just something they didn't account for in the builder. But yeah, Pokemon just trading strong attacks back and forth here. Kilowattrel trying to protect and get through these turns. Gyarados, fairly specially bulky, and of course resists water and fighting. Able to sit on the field right now. And it looks like Reckless Trico might be able to stall out these Trick Room turns after all. We see the Shiftry activate Room Service when it comes in. It just goes for Explosion. It does knock out Gyarados, but Kilowattrel still has a Focus Sash intact, able to set Tailwind. boost itself up, get a clear speed advantage, not that it didn't have that already, over Mr. Krabs and Torkoal as the Trick Room does wear off. Crocodile able to go for that Earthquake next to a flying type partner. Kilowattrel chipping Torkoal down with Terra Blast. We don't know what its Terra type is, but even just a normal type Terra Blast gets a little bit of damage to weaken that eruption a little more, and that does not do much to Crocodile now. Crocodile able to clean this one up pretty smoothly. I feel like I got a little bit distracted by the Instruct play there, but let's quickly review what happened. So Trick Room went up turn 1, and then they knock out the Arcanine here. What does Kilowattrel do? Right, they don't attack Kilowattrel. The Thunderbolt doesn't do much, but Kilowattrel's taking no damage. Its Sash is still intact. Then the Gyarados is able to kill a couple of Trick Room turns. And they're still just not attacking Kilowattrel, so that's why it was able to stall out the Trick Room turns. I mean, I don't know that it would necessarily be the correct play to attack Kilowattrel, but yeah, it gets to do a little bit of damage here and there, and then it gets this free Protect on the second last turn. And it gets to the last turn of Trick Room with its Focus Sash still intact. And then the Tailwind doesn't really matter in the end, so I guess it doesn't really... It's not that... If you can only remove one of Kilowattrel and Gyarados... But then Mr. Krabs could maybe have removed Kilowattrel with the Shift Tree still KOing the Gyarados after. So, I don't know. I'm not going to take the time right now to think this all the way through. In the end, the Crocodile 1v1s the Torkoal outside of Trick Room and wins this game. But, yeah, pretty solid there by Reckless Trico. And, again, as I always say, you can see a first-person perspective on this set on their own channel, Reckless Trico. They've been posting PDL videos longer than I have, and were kind of an inspiration to me to start doing this, so definitely go check that out. And just one set left to cover. The Peaceful Porygons against the Regional Reshirams. The Porygons once again bringing the Cetoddle. I meant to look up Cetoddle's stats between recordings, but I don't think I remembered to do that. We see the very scary Sun duo of Charizard and Jumpluff. We see the Ursaluna. We see the Electros. So they could play a Disquake game next to Ursaluna if they want to. Although into the team that always has Gallade, maybe that's not the strongest thing. We see the Mimikyu, which so they could set Tailwind with Jumpluff for Charizard or Ursaluna. They could set Trick Room for Ursaluna with Mimikyu. I don't know what the Cetoddle does. On the Reshiram side, Jolteon makes sense, fast. Hits Charizard hard, can be engineered to hit Jumpluff hard. Try to outspeed a fast mode here, given that the Sunsetter is probably Jumpluff, so it doesn't get Chlorophyll immediately. Primarina, strong offensive threat into the likes of Charizard and Ursaluna. Yeah, Gallade with Wide Guard could be very helpful here, and it has some offensive coverage into most of the threats on this team. Not so much Mimikyu. And then some other strong Pokemon like Braviary. Moongus could be strong into Trick Room mode. I'm not sure what Toxapex is here for, but let's jump right in and see. We see Jumpluff leading with Cetoddle against Gallade and Braviary. Jumpluff going straight for Pollen Puff into Cetoddle? What did they... I don't know what they were anticipating there. I'm sure Robbie will show up in the comments to let me know if it doesn't become obvious by the end of the video. And Gallade knocks out Cetoddle with Sacred Sword. Okay. Okay. Once again, I have read some of the match discussion in the Discord. I actually am going to take a quick look at that again, because I think that'll give us some answers. I think the Cetoddle was going for Belly Drum. It did have a Belly Drum set with Ice Shard and High Horsepower for damage, which is decent coverage into this team. But yeah, I think it was going for Belly Drum. I'm not 100% certain. I'm sure Robbie can let me know. But the Pollen Puff turn 1 from the faster Jumpluff, when Jumpluff had the highest base speed on the field, so you could reasonably guess it's faster and everything. I feel like I must be missing something, but I really don't know what happened there. Anyway, the Braviary's gotten Tailwind up, the Citadel is gone. We see Mimikyu and Ursaluna probably going for Trick Room stuff now, but Mimikyu gets taunted and doesn't have a Mental Herb, so no Trick Room. Ursaluna is on the field and burned. Just protecting right now around this possible Sacred Sword, I'm sure. Yeah. As Mimikyu's disguise gets broken, but Mimikyu does knock out the Gallade with Play Rough, so that fighting type threat is removed, but it's Primarina in the back. So the Reshiram's bringing a lot of offensive coverage into Ursaluna, and once they're able to deny Trick Room, they're able to pretty well chase it off the field, and it's hard to believe that Jumpluff has the tools to turn this around. Although that Tailwind is a strong start. Braviary knocking out Jumpluff, but Ursaluna we know is faster under this Tailwind, but here's the Amoonguss on the Reshiram side, going for Rage Powder, surviving the Facade. Braviary doing enough damage back to Ursaluna that it'll be able to win on the next turn. So the Ursaluna almost turned it back around thanks to Jumpluff being the fastest Pokemon and getting the Tailwind up, and Ursaluna able to move next. Braviary not going for Tailwind again, but Braviary had enough damage with the Amoonguss supporting it in the back. And of course, if Robbie had targeted Braviary instead of Primarina, then Primarina would have just gotten rid of the Ursaluna pretty quickly. So yeah, the Reshirams take game 1, bringing offensive threats to keep the Ursaluna in check, denying the Trick Room. Pretty solid game from them all around, although maybe bailed out a little bit, well, helped out a little bit by whatever was going on with the Citadel. I don't know whether we'll see the Citadel again in the rest of the set, but we'll find out starting in game 2. As it's Ursaluna leading with Jumpluff into Gallade and Braviary again. Ursaluna going straight for the Fairy Terra this time, and a Bulk Up. And it has Tailwind up. We know that Ursaluna would be faster than these two if Braviary had not set Tailwind as well, but it does. But it gets Encored, so now it's removed as an offensive threat for the time being. Gallade left to click Leaf Blade into Ursaluna. Does it not have Psycho Cut here? Night Slash, Leaf Blade, Sacred Sword. Did we see its 4th move? I don't remember. I feel like Psycho Cut would be kind of important to cover the likes of Charizard and Jumpluff, no? Well, I don't know the inner details of every team's game plan every week. Maybe I'm a little bit off base on how to build the Gallade for this one, but it looks like they don't have Psycho Cut if they're using Leaf Blade into this Fairy Ursaluna. Gallade gets knocked out. Braviary is stuck clicking Tailwind. We see Primarina come in. Amoonguss comes in, but of course it doesn't have the Rage Powder this turn while switching in. Jumpluff showing what the Pollen Puff can do. Ursaluna takes that Hyper Voice pretty well now that it's not a ground type anymore. And seriously, just letting Ursaluna Terrastalize and get set up. For all that I talked up all these offensive checks to Ursaluna, as soon as it Terrastalized and got set up early in the game, suddenly those offensive checks just kind of melted away. And we see Electros in next to Ursaluna now. Ursaluna one-shotting the Amoonguss with a +1 Facade. Of course, Amoonguss did narrowly take an unboosted Facade, while only Guts boosted earlier in Game 1. So +1, of course, enough to KO. Electros with the Electro Web giving a little bit more speed control. And Ursaluna able to finish off the Braviary and close this one out. So Game 1, the Citadel tried to do something. I think it went for Belly Drum. Got knocked out, and then Ursaluna... even then, the Porygons adjusted pretty well on the fly, right? They got the Ursaluna pretty well positioned, but it fell just short against the Amoonguss in the end. Game 2, game plan focused on the Ursaluna, and it just sweeps. So, all that's left is to go to Game 3 and see now what the Reshirams have for a Fairy Ursaluna here. You could try leading Amoonguss and clicking Spore turn 1, but then the Ursaluna just protects to get its burn. Maybe the Toxapex has something, but of course Toxapex doesn't want to take a Headlong Rush or an Earthquake. Ursaluna can just click Earthquake too in some positions. I don't remember whether we've seen all of the Gallade's moves, but well, it could have Wide Guard. Wide Guard makes sense into this team. I guess if we haven't seen all of its moves yet. I know we've seen Sacred Sword, Leaf Blade, and Night Slash. If it's possible that the last move is Wide Guard, maybe you'd be careful about clicking an Earthquake, but Earthquake would do a lot to Jolteon, Toxapex, even Amoonguss, even Primarina, and they have 2 flying types and a Levitator to click it next to. That all assumes an Ursaluna-centered game plan again in this game, and that is not what we get as we see the Charizard lead with the Jump Bluff into, sure enough, Amoonguss and Braviary. So yeah, I feel like Spore into Ursaluna would not work. But maybe just having the Amoonguss and forcing the Ursaluna to protect slows down some of its setup, lets you get a Tailwind, lets you offensively check it more effectively while it doesn't get to +1 with the Bulk Up. Maybe that's the idea behind the Amoonguss lead, but Robbie, one step ahead of everyone else here, including me, finally showing the Charizard now in this set. We see Amoonguss forced out for Primarina, which still takes a fair bit from that sun-boosted Heat Wave, as Braviary just drops. No Tailwind on the board this game for the Reshirams. The Gallade comes in. Terra Fire and Terra Water. Interesting. Both starters doubling down on their types. And I don't know whether the Gallade had Wide Guard or not, but it certainly didn't click it there, as Charizard just melted both opponents away. Of course, pre-Terra Heat Wave did almost half to Primarina, so no surprise that Terastallized Heat Wave picks up the KO. Jump Bluff has set the Tailwind. Charizard can just run away with this one. Amoonguss is not going to stop Charizard. And the regional Reshirams just forfeit. And as much as I talked up that Ursaluna sweep in Game 2, this Charizard sweep took 2 turns. 3 if they don't forfeit. And yeah, the Reshirams tried to adjust to the Ursaluna, but that just opened up holes for the Charizard to push right through like a star running back. Okay, the metaphors are not really landing right now, but the peaceful Porygons, of course, after defeating our Halifax Masquerade Men in Week 1, are still just such a powerful team, putting in so much work week after week with these offensive threats. Definitely another one of the teams to beat, along with the likes of the varsity Farmboys this season. And I know it's going to be interesting to watch this team and all of these teams and see what they come up with as the season goes on, and hopefully the Satotl will put in more work in a future week as well. But that was PDL Week 3. As always, a lot of strong teams, a lot of strong Pokemon putting in a ton of work, some really fun sweeps to watch this week, and I know that people will be game planning hard for some of these matchups in the rest of the season. 5 more weeks and then playoffs. We're back to doing this in the normal format. I'll think about whether I want to make any changes to make things a little smoother, but in the meantime, please do like and subscribe and keep watching Prismatic Draft League Season 7. Oh, and the Gallade used Taunt in Game 1, so that was its other move. No Wide Guard and no Psycho Cut, and Robbie did know that by Game 3, so okay, makes sense.